today I'm going to talk about how do we take into account some of the things that we've been doing from a cybersecurity standpoint, a cloud security, and how do we turn that into, as this whole AI revolution is ongoing, that it's something that is useful, and that we know that we are actually doing what we need to as more and more organizations try to leverage AI. And just to put things into context, this is one of the other stats that our CEO has been touting lately. Is there's an estimate by the end of the decade that AI is going to add $16 trillion to the economy in terms of the benefit that AI is going to unlock. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit on the evolution of AI, and really as we talk about generative AI, what is it? There's a lot of misperceptions out there about what AI is and what AI does versus what it is. I'm going to talk touch on the landscape. Those who might have been in here where they were just talking about the cybersecurity regulatory landscape. You know, how does that? What are we seeing from an AI perspective? And then we're going to get into AI governance and what is it that you have to think about in terms of building that program out as your organizations start to consider how are we going to use AI. And just so everyone knows, my slides should be uploaded to the CSA website after the with everybody else. So just to keep that in mind for you. All right, so let's talk about what is AI in the first place and how do we get to this a year ago when all of a sudden OpenAI and ChatGPT kind of hit the news. So first of all, AI isn't necessarily all that new. In the cybersecurity field, we've actually had, if you think about it, AI has been embedded into a number of like the cybersecurity tools that are out there. This is not it's not like it just suddenly happened in the last year. There has been AI around up to this point. But what we're seeing with the evolution of AI and what ChatGPT and OpenAI have brought to the forefront is we've gone from this machine learning where, yes, as computing power is growing, as data lakes, data storage, the amount of data that's actually being used to train the AI has grown. We've gone from where that AI has been very task specific, very, it's been individual use cases, each AI model to use, to now this foundation models. And understand that large language models like ChatGPT, that is a form of foundation models. There are other foundation models that are out there. There's a whole series, but the bottom line is what we are doing, from an industry standpoint, what you see is instead of each model being only able to be used for a specific use case, you have to have large amounts of training, training and data for that model. Now we have these foundation models that can actually be used, a single model can actually be used for multiple different use cases. That being said, there are some caveats to that. So when we look at it over on the left-hand side, that's where kind of the traditional, each model, you had to have a large amount of labeled data that would train the model. And in the cybersecurity field, the best example I can give is we talk about malware or some of the malware tools that are out there or some of the anti-phishing tools that are out there. You had to have the equivalent of this is a phishing email, this is not a phishing email. And large amounts of that was used so that you could train the model to then recognize when that new phishing email or that new piece of malware came along. Now you're going to get the alert in your cybersecurity tool. As opposed to with the foundation models, you have to do training for those models, and it costs a lot of money and takes a lot of energy and effort to actually go through that training. But that's the foundation for what you use. And there's a couple of different ways that you can actually use these foundation models. One of them is called zero-shot prompting or no prompting whatsoever, where you just literally use what the large language or the foundation model, large language model, what it's trained, the data sources that it's been trained on. The challenge with that is a lot of times there can be errors, and we'll talk about some of the risks associated with this. You can also do what's called prompting when it comes to these foundation models, where you give it some additional context or data so it helps the model actually figure out what those right particular answers are. So you'll have a relatively small subset of that labeled data for your specific use case. And then there's data-driven tuning where you actually have a little bit larger of a subset, but we're still only talking hundreds or small thousands in terms of the amount of data that you're using for this data tuning for how you want a model to respond when it comes up with a particular situation. As opposed to, when you take some of these foundation models like ChatGPT, like some of the other ones that are out there, you're talking, millions or hundreds of millions of data tokens that are actually being used to train those models, and it takes a long time to do that. So there's a couple different ways that you can use it. They each have some pluses and minuses in terms of cost, in terms of I'll call it the accuracy of the way the foundation model will actually come up with an answer. But the reality is, you no longer have to follow this. Each individual model is only good for a single use case. So what are some of those traditional risks, or some of those risks that are associated with AI? Like any type of data model, there are some that fit in line with what we've seen already up to this point with any other type of data analytics, big data analysis type things that are out there. We also have some new ones associated with the foundation models. And one thing I want to talk about just to highlight, and you've probably read some of the stories, the term is called hallucination. And that's where the foundation model makes up something that isn't true, and it is convinced that it's true. If you actually query the foundation model, probably the biggest one is there's a news story about how a lawyer used ChatGPT to cite case law for a case that he was working on, and ChatGPT came up with a great case law. It had citations and everything, only it didn't exist. But that's because foundation models really aren't supposed to be about finding facts. If you want to find facts on something, you're probably just as well to Google it. And that you really are. You're probably going to get as good of an answer Googling for facts as you are using a foundation model. Understand things like ChatGPT and large language models. What the language model is doing is it's learned what's the probability based on one word, let's say cybersecurity, to figure out what that next word is. And it's a lot of almost, it's called vector mapping for the way the language works. A lot that goes into detail on that when you start talking to all the AI geeks on it as far as that goes. So you have to remember that's why are you using that model? And when we start talking about why we need to build a risk management program, that's because we're continuing to see a number of AI-related laws get passed across the globe. And really what it boils down to is these AI laws are almost outshoots from privacy laws, cybersecurity laws, data governance laws that are out there. And they're continuing to expand the laws that we're seeing across the board. And while the United States probably isn't the lead in terms of actually passing laws, there are some states that are certainly considering it. But the EU, just like they were dealing with GDPR and the privacy component and the privacy concerns for EU citizens, we're seeing the same type of thing when it comes to the from an AI perspective. So just putting it into context, here's what we're actually seeing. If you actually kind of do a word map of what are some of the key components that are coming up in these laws, here's what you can see. You can see data governance, privacy, transparency. These are what the respective regulatory entities across the globe are kind of expecting you to have in terms of being able to demonstrate when you're conducting or when you're leveraging AI to do some task within your organization. And so we take that, and you've got to figure out how are we going to actually build an AI risk management program and have the AI governance that we need to have in place. And at its core, you really want to think about it in terms of, are we in compliance with laws that we're responsible for being compliant with? Have we demonstrated the trustworthiness of these AI models? And are we essentially meeting the privacy requirements that we have to in terms of being good stewards with good stewards with the data that we're using for that AI? And there's, it's challenging. But the left-hand side with the challenges is when you do things manually, when you do things, not in coordination with your organization, when people work in silos, when you try to do one size fits all, that's where organizations are going to get into trouble when it comes to, not actually having a strong risk management program around their AI. Again, for those that might have been in here for the last one, one of the last things they touted was, talking about automation. Just like in cybersecurity, a lot of the other cybersecurity domains, automation helps out. The same is true in AI. And the benefit is there are tools that are out there. There are capabilities that should help you. Not that everything is automated, and you have to have a good process and program in place. But the more that you can automate, the better off you're going to be in terms of your risk management program. And when we talk about AI governance, we really are looking at kind of three pillars to it. One is your model risk itself and the model. The second one is making sure that you've got a good inventory. And then the third one is making sure that you really have that continuous evaluation and monitoring. So like many things in cybersecurity, when you're talking about an AI risk management program, this is not I'm gonna create it, I've created a process, I've bought a tool, or I'm using a tool, a model, okay, it's set, now I'm gonna go off and worry about my patch management or something else. The reality is this requires continuous update, continuous monitoring, because again, one of the things that we see is you may have started with a model to do a certain thing, you may have started with a use case, and there is this concept, just like we talk about configuration drift for servers or whatever the case is over time, you end up with the same thing with model drift, where it's not actually giving you the right answer or the answer that you want it to solve your particular use case over time. So you have to make sure that you're paying attention to that. And one of the things is we talk about the AI model lifecycle. This is a really nice process-oriented map here. The bottom line is every use case that you want to use AI for, you need to take it through this particular AI lifecycle. From starting with this model request, we want to do something. And on the IBM side, for example, we are seeing a lot of interest in leveraging chatbots for like HR processes and stuff like that. Well, each individual process, you need to make sure, okay, we want to use AI, we want to simplify, we want to automate. So how do you do that? Now you figure out, what model am I going to use? Am I going to use prompting? Am I going to use data tuning? Do I have data that I can use to prompt it or tune it? You go through a validation process, QA on all these types of things, but you go through that, and as I said before, even once you've deployed and you look at what you've deployed, you're happy, you're like, yes, this AI tool is doing what we want it to do. It's making our more efficient. It's doing some task or role for us as an organization much better. You've got to continue to monitor those particular organizations. One of those steps in there was that model risk assessment, and the really one of the best ways to think about when we talk about model risk assessment is it's kind of that home inspection that you get before you buy a house. Make sure that you understand everything about that model, and you understand it in the context of the use case that you want to have, so that you can do that. You can be able to have that fairness, explainability, and know when you're going to have any type of drift from your whatever your use case is and what that model is, if it suddenly starts to go off track, so to speak. from the standpoint of how do you actually document, how do you have that explainability component when we talk about AI? We've got this, there's this concept within the life cycle of we call it the fact sheet. And that's where you're starting to take information from all the different users. Remember I said before, you can't be siloed. You have to have your organization working together and break down those silos to make sure that you're understanding. So everything from the business owner who has the use case about what your actual business case you're trying to solve, to your data scientists, to your technology teams who are actually going to implement and run the AI tool and the AI model itself. You're in the construct of that, what you're doing is you're capturing facts. That is the term that's used about this for the AI model. And you want to capture it in what we refer to as a fact sheet. Now, one of the ways you can do that is you can use spreadsheets, and you can do this manually, but that is not a scalable solution to that. So if all you have is a single use case, maybe it's the first time you're dipping in the toes into some sort of generative AI, sure, that might be the way to start off with. But if you really want to be successful, you want to leverage some of the tools and the automation that are out there in terms of what can help you gather that information to tell you things like, what model did we use? Because there's a number of different AI models that are out there. When did this model get trained? I've actually seen a great, it was actually Microsoft that did this presentation where they actually showed, because the model data had ended in 2021, like the model was trained in 2021, so they actually asked a question about something that had happened in 2022, but the model basically said, well, that hasn't happened yet. It hasn't existed because it hadn't been trained on the model. So that's one of the things that you need in your fact sheet, in your AI governance. When was the model created? When was it tuned? When was it trained? What type of tuning data did you use to help it out? What type of prompting data did you? All of those things need to be essentially captured in one place in order to have that explainability concept of what your AI model is trying to do. And to kind of summarize, the single slide takeaway that I recommend, and the reason why I have this up here. So from our IBM Cloud for Financial Services program, the way that we approach it with our financial institution clients for how do you actually deploy onto a cloud, secure, risk, and compliant, is the model that we kind of take is we talk about define, implement, and assess. That's the model that we do across the board. So when we talk about for AI and having an AI risk management program, so the define is know what your requirements are, regulatory requirements based on your jurisdiction. Know what control frameworks you're using, and by the way, there are some control frameworks out there that actually have AI controls, but a lot of the ones that we've been using up to this point, NIST 853, NIST CSF, ISO 27000 series, they don't explicitly talk about AI. And while certainly a lot of those controls, they certainly apply when we talk about AI like they would any other technology that we're talking about from a cybersecurity standpoint. You need to evaluate, are there additional controls, especially in the realm of privacy and explainability, are there additional controls that you need to have in place? That's the define component. Then, from an implement standpoint, again, really what I was talking about there, you gotta make sure you implement an AI lifecycle process. Make sure that you've got the governance. Make sure that it's documented so everybody in your organization knows what you're trying to do and how you're supposed to do it, and that they're following that. And that's the last part, is the assess, that continuous assessment, monitoring of how you're leveraging AI, similar to how you'd have to do continuous cybersecurity monitoring. You need to be able to do that so that you can look for drift. You can look, I've splashed up a couple slides on the regulatory landscape look, it is changing on a weekly and monthly basis. So, you know, that slide, if I have to, you know, if I do this presentation in 3 months, I'm sure there's going to be changes to those slides that are out there, you know, in terms of some of the specifics. So you have to continually be aware of that. You have to continually assess and monitor your AI models, and as part of that life cycle in order to do that. So with that, I'll be around for the conference, so feel free to stop by, you know, chat more on this topic. You know, be happy to. And one last thing that I have for anybody that's in the financial sector, we actually have a financial services community. We actually partner very much with Cloud Security Alliance, but this is part of our IBM Tech Exchange website, where we continue to do, you know, try to have additional, you know, material training, whether it's on AI, whether it's on you know, whatever topic is, you know, love for the, you know, it's free for anybody, for, you know, the financial sector folks to sign up and go from there. So with that, thank you very much.